They don't eat all day, but then then they have a surplus. So you're producing some hormones that, although help in burning fat in the right now, but they're also burning muscle and slowing down your metabolism. So cortisol does that. Aldosterone is more of an androgen androgen hormone. So this with DHEA and the cortisol is going to counteract each other. So there is a balance. At this point, this is normal physiology. We're just responding how we're supposed to respond. After some time, we're going to see a drop in DHEA, and that's where we start to get symptomatic. When you're up there at a high level of these hormones, eventually DHEA, androgens, and other estrogens will drop. And so what's left is a green dotted line, which is cortisol. Cortisol is left. And there's nothing to back it up. And these are people who are eating sugar their whole life. And they're stressed because of so many different things, divorce, financial issues. And that represents a condition that's called Cushing's disease. And what's interesting about this is that have you ever seen someone with, they call it buffalo hump? This is something that's very particular to this disease. They also tend to have a moon face. People who look like that actually have been on prednisone for a while as well. You'll see that in the buffalo hump and the moon face. But that's a result of DHEA dropping and the cortisol staying high. What's interesting, I think, here is that as we see people move through this stress response, and especially in women, when you see this drop, you see sex drive totally cease. It's non-existent. But on the flip side, for younger ladies, that it can push them into puberty a lot faster, and that might explain why we have so many young ladies that are fully developed, and they're not even out of grade school. So you see what initiates this response. Something as simple as sugar can cause this cascade of hormonal responses that can have such a big impact on everything from our weight to, I mentioned fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, tiredness. So this is, by the way, there's a president that was diagnosed with this, Addison's disease. Anyone know who that was? Yeah, it was really, it was interesting.
Kennedy?
Yes, President Kennedy. He was hit by a battleship? I can't remember that. But yeah, that was such a traumatic experience for him that it sent him into adrenal burnout right away. But this takes years. But the point I'm making here is that sugar can push us in this direction, and that is why sugar is the #1 stressor that you'll ever be exposed to. We think it's so many other things, our childhood, the way we were brought up, circumstances in adulthood, financial hardship, etc., etc., etc. But all of that is very intense. But if you think about what children are exposed to at a young age, it's sugar, and it continues the whole life. And then when people do encounter these very stressful moments in their life, what do? We add even more of, if you will, insult to injury by going to sugar. We revert to eating things that are comforting. We self-medicate with sugar. What happens is, when you get some sugar, of course you're going to get a feel-good hormone response, adrenaline. Okay, and it makes you feel good right now, but then eventually you're going to drop, and the adrenals get burned out. So what happens with adrenal burnout? What does that translate to, and what does that feel like? Well, I mentioned one thing, decreased sex drive. A second thing was in young ladies, it can push them into puberty sooner than they would. In men, we see more of a feminizing effect in the body. So it really starts to create more of a estrogen sensitivity. In men, we also see a lot of, and in women, it's adrenal belly. You know, it's kind of like what we call a beer gut. That tends to happen as well. So even in looking at people, you can kind of see where they're at. And all of that, again, can link back to sugar. So this is the reason why it's so important in this program we eliminate so many foods. Maybe this makes a little more sense now why you can't have pasta, you can't have breads, because all these things convert to sugar. And what we're trying to do in this program is limit that conversion, keep it to a minimum, and help your body revert to another fuel source, which is fat. You know, that's why you have, you know, we encourage you to use fat on this, I shouldn't call it a diet, on this eating program. Olive oil, coconut oil, and in that you're not gonna have the insulin response, which is going to cause this mess here. So that's the link between sugar and adrenal issues. The other thing that Doc wanted me to kind of talk about in this course is how the liver comes into play here. The liver is something that this particular program focuses a lot of attention on, and the liver is never talked about when we're addressing the body's ability to manage sugar. But in all reality, it's a huge part. When we see people who have liver issues, right in line with that are sugar handling issues. As a matter of fact, Johns Hopkins University did a study that looked at, I don't remember exactly how many patients they looked at, case studies, but they were all sugar handling problems, either pre-diabetic, diabetic, and what they found is 98% of those patients had a tie-in with some type of liver issue. So what they concluded is that the liver has a very integral part in being able to being able to affect sugar balancing, and the way it does that is through its processing of fats. So that is why Atkins, in some respect, had it. He nailed it right on. I mean, that is what we needed to learn then. The problem is that now we have, with fats, we have, again, the adulteration of a good food. We have trans fats, we have hydrogenated oils. It's man always going back and trying to fix what God made and make it better. And it never works that way. It never works. You look at margarine, butter is much better. You know, you can use butter in this program. Butter has a lot of nutritious, a lot of nutrients in it that are actually helpful in different ways. One, anti-inflammatory. You know, there's, for example, whole eggs versus egg whites. You know, you think that by taking the fats out, you're doing better. Well, the egg yolks contain CLA, conjugated linoleic acid, which has been shown to help in burning fat tremendously. What's interesting too is that the egg yolk has choline in it, which also helps in addressing high cholesterol. It kind of serves as a detergent for the liver, and it helps in reducing the surface tension of fats so you can utilize them better, so you can digest them better. So you see, there's a lot of science behind this. Ironically, years ago, doctors would actually suggest to patients to get on a whole egg diet if their cholesterol is high. And nowadays, it's like sacrilege. You don't touch the egg yolk. Just looking at it will raise your cholesterol. And it's nothing to be farther from the truth. Most patients that have high cholesterol, that's an endogenous thing. That means they're making it, they're making too much cholesterol, not they're taking too much cholesterol. And the reason we see this is because when we take cholesterol out of the diet, the impact is minimal. Interestingly enough, and here's the link between the liver and all the different body systems, if you take sugar out of the diet, guess what happens with cholesterol? It comes down. Sugar balancing the liver. It's that link. So we've covered how sugar affects the adrenals. And I know, I don't expect you to remember what CRH is or what the pituitary gland does, but I wanted to take you kind of through this very complex process so you can see how sugar can have such a huge impact. We covered its impact on the adrenals. We covered how sugar is related to the liver. That's why we have to address the liver, because the liver is going to help us deal with sugar. But there's a final aspect that we never think about, and it's sugar's effect on the immune system. And I've said this at several of the purification talks, but if you didn't get it, this is something that you need to understand, because it plays a huge part. Before you reach for Tylenol when you're sick, or before you think of an antibiotic, think of this. 75 grams of sugar, which is about a bottle of pop, will reduce cell-mediated immunity 50% for 2 hours. So what I'm saying in plain English is that the most basic unit of living material in our bodies, the cell, has a 50% less chance of dealing with invasion, with infection, after only consuming 75 grams of sugar. What's the equivalent? I mean, like I said, it's a bottle of pop, a bagel. You saw how much sugar was in all of that. So just a can is, what they say, 42 grams of sugar, something like that. So a bottle. This is the reason why we want the pop machines out of schools. And you wonder why. Anymore, you talk to people, it's not like, it doesn't matter the time of year, something's always going around. What do people talk about? The weather and what's going around. How everyone's sick. Lately, it's been sinus infections. I talk to so many people with sinus infections. It's always something, because we're at a loss here in being able to mount the proper immune response. Sugar. Sugar, sugar, sugar. So, you had a question? So we've got sugar and its impact on the adrenals. Without the adrenals, by the way, the difference between, I have to say, is for those of you that are athletically inclined or have kids that are athletes, the difference between an athlete that develops more muscle mass or is able to deal with sports a lot more and keep in line with his homework and school and all that, a lot of times comes down to the adrenals, because the adrenals allow someone to recover from one workout to the next, from one strenuous activity to the next. So we see this, and they've actually looked at bodybuilders who were able to develop a lot of muscle mass, and they found that these bodybuilders are able to do this. They worked out frequently, but they also had healthy adrenals. So that's kind of an interesting side thing there, how the adrenals are so important. And again, sugar in the liver. The liver, and this is something that you covered with the purification program. We address the liver. Purifying, detoxifying, that will help the liver function better and fall in line with what it really needs to do. And then finally, sugar in the immune system. And it's being able to mount the proper response, being able to allow your body to do what it needs to do without using antibiotics that cause a lot of different problems, Tylenol, which affects the liver, so on and so forth. So that's the link. He made me promise that I was going to keep it at 35 minutes. So. But he's not here, so any questions? There you are. Any questions on that? Yes?
The sugar that is naturally in fruits, is that, I know on